The Zereth Empire had ruled this sector of the galaxy for centuries, its dominance unquestioned, its enemies crushed before they could even pose a real threat. Their fleets patrolled the stars with arrogance, their technology far beyond that of any known species. To the Zereth, war was not a gamble, it was a guarantee of victory. But something had changed. It started with whispers, reports of missing patrol ships, fleets vanishing without sending a single distress signal. A deep space mining station had gone dark, its last transmission filled with static and garbled screams. High Command dismissed these as technical malfunctions, perhaps pirates, or even a natural disaster. But those who had served long enough knew better. Something unseen was moving in the dark. Commander Vorak stood at the bridge of the warship Praxin, watching the endless void of space through the reinforced glass viewport. His crimson eyes narrowed as his claws tapped against the armrest of his command chair. He was an experienced warrior, one who had fought in dozens of campaigns, crushed rebellions, and conquered worlds. Yet, for the first time in his long career, unease crept into his chest. "Status report," he barked. A technician, younger and far more nervous, turned in his seat. "Commander, we are still unable to establish communication with Outpost Theta 9. They were scheduled for a check-in 3 hours ago." "Send a probe," Vorak ordered. "I want visuals." The technician hesitated. "We already did, sir." Vorak's gaze sharpened, and there's nothing there. A silence settled over the bridge, heavy and unnatural. Vorak leaned forward. "What do you mean, nothing?" "The outpost is gone. No debris, no wreckage. It's as if it was never built." Vorak gritted his teeth. That was impossible. Even if the station had been destroyed, there would be something left behind. Burnt metal, escape pods, lifeless bodies floating in space. But to have it vanish without a trace, that defied logic. "Run a full system scan. I want to know if there's any energy disturbance, any unusual activity within 100 light-years." The crew scrambled to obey. Moments later, another officer spoke up. "Commander, long-range sensors are detecting anomalies." "Define anomalies." "They appear to be faint distortions in space, but they don't match any known cosmic phenomena. They move." Vorak's claws dug into his armrest. The tension on the bridge was suffocating. No one wanted to say it, but they were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't natural. "Open a secure channel to High Command," Vorak ordered. "Inform them that we may have an unknown presence in our sector." But before the communication could be sent, alarms blared across the ship. The red emergency lights bathed the bridge in a warning glow. The crew scrambled, hands flying across control panels as they tried to identify the threat. "Commander," the lead weapons officer shouted, "multiple unidentified vessels have just appeared on our short-range sensors. They weren't there a second ago." Vorak's heart pounded. That was impossible. No fleet could just appear out of nowhere, not without cloaking technology, he muttered under his breath. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was no ordinary enemy. The Zereth prided themselves on having the most advanced warships in the known galaxy, yet someone had developed stealth capabilities beyond anything they had ever seen. That meant only one thing. This enemy had been watching them, studying them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, they had chosen to reveal themselves. "Shields up. Battle formations." Vorak roared, rising from his seat. "I want a full weapons lock on those ships. Now." But before his command could be fully carried out, the first explosion rocked the Praxin. The ship trembled violently as a surge of energy ripped through its hull. Sparks flew from the overhead lights, consoles flickered, and the air filled with the acrid scent of burnt circuitry. "Direct hit. Our dorsal cannons are offline. We can't pinpoint their exact location. They're moving too fast." Vorak's claws clenched into fists. "Return fire. Fire at anything that moves." Warship's turrets erupted in plasma fire, sending bolts of deadly energy into the void. But they were shooting blindly. The enemy was too fast, too unpredictable. Their attacks came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Another explosion sent crew members sprawling to the floor. A deafening groan echoed through the ship as something massive tore through its side. "Commander," a panicked voice shouted. "The fleet. They're disappearing. We're losing ships at an alarming rate." Vorik turned toward the viewport, his stomach twisting. He watched in horror as one of their capital ships, the Zalcora, was split in two by an unseen force. The massive vessel, capable of leveling entire planets, was reduced to a smoldering wreck in seconds. The enemy wasn't just winning. They were annihilating the Zereth fleet. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. The silent enemy vanished once more into the darkness, leaving only drifting debris and the echoes of destruction. The Vraxen floated aimlessly, its once mighty presence reduced to a crippled husk. Fires raged through its corridors, emergency sirens wailing like the screams of the dying. Vorik stood frozen, his mind racing. His empire had never faced anything like this. Whoever this enemy was, they were far more advanced than the Zereth. A single message flashed across their broken communication screens, written in an alien language that translated instantly into Zereth text. "We are humanity. Your reign ends now." Vorik's blood ran cold. Humanity, a species they had dismissed as insignificant. A race that had been little more than a footnote in Zereth records, barely acknowledged in the vast tapestry of galactic history. And yet they had just crippled one of the strongest fleets in the Empire without suffering a single casualty. This was not a battle. This was a warning. And Vorik knew, with absolute certainty, that the war had only just begun. The night sky above Outpost Theta 9 shimmered with faint streaks of light, debris still falling from the destroyed Zereth fleet. Fires burned in the distant hills, casting shadows that flickered across the steel walls of the alien outpost. Automated sentry drones hovered along the perimeter, their crimson optics scanning the darkness for any sign of intruders. Beyond the gates, towering spires of metal stretched toward the sky, their sleek design a testament to Zereth's technological superiority. Yet, for all their advancements, they never saw the humans coming. Captain Bonner crouched low behind a rocky outcrop, his pulse rifle clutched tightly in his hands. His visor displayed the layout of the facility, a glowing map projected onto his HUD. Red dots marked enemy positions, while blue icons showed the locations of his squad mates, each moving silently through the shadows, cloaked by advanced stealth suits that bent light around their bodies. The air smelled faintly of scorched metal and ozone, remnants of the earlier orbital strike that had disabled the outpost's long-range sensors. "Status check," Bonner whispered into his comm. "Delta 3 in position," came Sergeant Cole's voice, calm and steady despite the tension. "Delta 4 ready," added Private Reyes, his breathing slightly heavier than the others. The rookie's nerves were showing, but Bonner couldn't blame him. This was their first direct assault on a Zereth stronghold. No one knew what kind of resistance they'd face inside. "Hold steady," Bonner replied, scanning the patrol routes of the sentry drones. Their movements were precise, calculated. Any deviation from their normal patterns would trigger an alarm, bringing the full might of the Zereth garrison down on them. "Remember, no mistakes. We disable their defense grid, and the fleet finishes the job. Stick to the plan, and we walk out of here alive." No one responded, but Bonner could feel their determination through the calm silence. They knew what was at stake. Humanity had come too far, lost too much, to fail now. Bonner waited until the nearest drone drifted past, then tapped his wrist-mounted control pad. A faint shimmer passed over his armor as the cloaking system activated, rendering him nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. He moved swiftly, boots barely making a sound as he crossed the open ground toward the perimeter fence. The metal surface glowed faintly with an electric charge, enough to vaporize anyone who touched it unprotected. Bonner reached into his belt pouch, pulling out a small cylindrical device. With a press of his thumb, the device emitted a pulse of blue light that momentarily short-circuited the fence's power supply. The hum of electricity faded, and Bonner slipped through the gap. Inside the perimeter, the air felt heavier, thicker with the tension of impending violence. Bonner raised his rifle, scanning the shadows for movement as he advanced toward the main structure. His visor highlighted the heat signatures of two Zereth soldiers standing guard near the entrance, tall, armored figures with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Their plasma rifles pulsed with faint blue light, deadly even at long range. "Delta 3, take the left. Delta 4, cover the right," Bonner whispered. Two faint blurs of motion flickered past him as Cole and Reyes moved into position. Bonner raised his rifle, aligning the crosshairs over the nearest soldier's head. His pulse quickened as adrenaline flooded his veins. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The distant hum of machinery faded into the background. All that existed was the target, the pressure of his finger against the trigger. Bonner fired. A flash of blue light erupted from the rifle's barrel, followed by a sharp crack as the energy bolt struck the soldier's helmet. The Zereth crumpled without a sound. Cole fired a heartbeat later, dropping the second guard before it could react. Both bodies hit the ground simultaneously, leaving only the faint hiss of cooling plasma in the air. "Clear," Cole reported. "Move in," Bonner ordered. The squad advanced through the entrance, moving with lethal precision through the steel corridors. Overhead lights cast harsh white beams across the walls, reflecting off polished metal and glass. The air smelled sterile, with a faint undercurrent of something metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike. Bonner's HUD displayed their primary objective: the central control room, where the outpost's automated defenses could be disabled. Without those systems, the human fleet could launch its full-scale assault without fear of retaliation. But getting there meant crossing through the heart of enemy territory. As they approached an intersection, Bonner raised a clenched fist, signaling the squad to halt. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, heavy, deliberate, and growing closer. The humans pressed themselves against the walls, cloaking systems shimmering faintly as they blended into the shadows. A trio of Zereth soldiers rounded the corner, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights. They carried plasma rifles at the ready, scanning their surroundings with the cold efficiency of seasoned warriors. One of them paused, tilting its head as if sensing something just beyond its vision. Bonner held his breath, finger poised over the trigger. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing like a war drum in his ears. The soldier took a step closer. Then, without warning, Reyes shifted his weight and accidentally knocked a loose panel against the wall. The sound was faint, but in the silent corridor, it might as well have been a gunshot. The Zereth soldiers spun toward the noise, raising their weapons. "Engage," Bonner shouted. The corridor erupted in a storm of energy bolts and plasma fire. Blue streaks of light tore through the air as Bonner and Cole opened fire, dropping the nearest soldier before it could react. The remaining two returned fire, their plasma rounds scorching the walls and filling the air with the acrid scent of burnt metal. Reyes ducked behind a control console, pulse rifle shaking in his hands as he fired wildly toward the enemy. "Reyes, focus your shots," Bonner barked, diving behind a steel crate as a plasma bolt scorched the air inches from his head. He popped up, firing 3 quick bursts into the chest of the nearest Zereth. The alien staggered backward, armor cracking beneath the onslaught, but still it advanced, eyes burning with fury. Cole charged forward, activating the kinetic boosters in his combat boots. His armored gauntlet smashed into the alien's chest, driving it backward against the wall with a sickening crunch. Before it could recover, Cole pressed his pulse pistol against its helmet and fired, ending the fight with a single shot. The final Zereth fired wildly, plasma bolts scorching the walls as it retreated down the corridor. Bonner pursued, boots pounding against the metal floor. The alien turned, raising its rifle. Too late. Bonner fired a precise shot that pierced the soldier's helmet, sending it sprawling to the ground. "Clear," he called, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Rookie, you okay?" Cole asked, glancing toward Reyes. Yeah, I'm fine," Reyes stammered, though his hand still trembled slightly. "Stay sharp," Bonner said, gripping Reyes's shoulder briefly. "We're not done yet." They moved quickly now, knowing their presence had been detected. Alarms blared overhead, red warning lights flashing along the walls. Automated turrets deployed from the ceiling, swiveling toward the advancing humans. Bonner dove behind cover as a barrage of plasma bolts scorched the air around him. "Suppressive fire," he shouted. Cole and Reyes opened fire, their rifles unleashing rapid bursts of energy that forced the turrets to recalibrate. Bonner seized the opportunity, sprinting forward and tossing a compact EMP grenade into the nearest turret's line of fire. The device exploded with a burst of blue light, frying the turret's circuitry and leaving it sparking and inert. "Keep moving." They sprinted down the corridor, dodging automated defenses and cutting down any Zereth soldiers that crossed their path. Bonner's pulse pounded in his ears, adrenaline fueling every step as they approached the central control room. The door loomed ahead, a thick slab of reinforced steel designed to withstand even heavy artillery fire. But Bonner had come prepared. He slapped a breaching charge against the door's locking mechanism and stepped back as the countdown began. The air crackled with static as the device hummed to life. 3, 2, 1. The explosion ripped through the air, sending shards of metal flying in all directions. Bonner charged through the smoke, pulse rifle raised, and came face to face with a squad of Zereth soldiers waiting inside. The room erupted into chaos. The room exploded with plasma fire the moment Bonner stepped through the breached doorway. Blazing blue bolts tore through the air, scorching metal walls and shattering glass consoles in bursts of sparks. Bonner dove sideways, rolling behind a steel barrier as the air sizzled with heat. Cole and Reyes burst in behind him, weapons raised as they unleashed rapid bursts of pulse fire into the enemy ranks. The Zereth soldiers inside the control room were unlike the ones they had faced outside. Their armor was thicker, reinforced with segmented plating that deflected all but the most precise shots. Their movements were faster, more fluid, elite warriors trained to protect the heart of the outpost at all costs. Bonner's pulse rifle spat energy rounds as he targeted the nearest enemy, aiming for the gaps in its armor. The alien staggered as a bolt pierced its side, but it didn't fall. Instead, it charged forward, plasma blade igniting with a hiss of white-hot energy. Bonner barely had time to react. The alien lunged, blade slashing through the air with lethal speed. Bonner ducked beneath the strike, feeling the heat of the plasma blade pass inches above his head. He rolled to the side, raising his rifle and firing 3 quick shots into the soldier's exposed flank. The alien fell, armor smoking where the energy rounds had burned through. "Push forward," Bonner shouted over the chaos. Cole advanced on the left, using his kinetic boosters to leap over a console and land behind a cluster of Zereth soldiers. His pulse pistol barked rapidly as he fired at point-blank range, dropping 2 aliens before the others could react. Reyes moved to the right, crouching low as he fired controlled bursts that chipped away at the enemy's armor. Bonner sprinted forward, dodging plasma bolts that scorched the air around him. The control room's central console loomed ahead, a sleek, circular platform surrounded by holographic displays. If they could reach it, they could disable the outpost's automated defenses and clear the way for the fleet. But between them and the console stood the squad's commander, a towering Zereth warrior clad in black armor etched with glowing red lines. Its eyes burned with a cold blue light as it raised a plasma halberd that crackled with energy. Bonner barely had time to react before the alien charge. The floor trembled beneath its heavy footsteps as it swung the halberd in a wide arc, forcing Bonner to dive backward to avoid the strike. The weapon carved a molten scar across the floor where Bonner had stood just moments before. Bonner fired his rifle, but the alien raised a shield built into its left arm, deflecting the energy bolts with ease. Cole leaped into the fray, kinetic boosters propelling him forward as he aimed a punch at the alien's chest. The Zereth commander twisted aside with inhuman speed, slamming the butt of its halberd into Cole's side and sending him crashing into a console. Sparks erupted as the equipment shattered beneath the impact. "Cole," Bonner shouted, but there was no time to check if he was okay. The commander advanced, halberd raised high as it swung down in a lethal arc. Bonner rolled aside, narrowly avoiding the blow as the weapon sliced into the floor with a burst of molten steel. He fired his rifle point blank at the alien's exposed side, but the commander twisted its shield to intercept the shots, deflecting them with ease. Reyes tried to flank the alien from the side, firing rapid bursts at its back. The commander spun with blinding speed, its halberd slicing through the air as Reyes barely managed to duck beneath the strike. The rookie fired again, this time aiming for the alien's legs. One of the shots struck home, causing the commander to stagger slightly, but it recovered almost instantly, eyes blazing with fury. Bonner seized the opportunity. He activated his kinetic boosters, propelling himself forward with explosive speed. The alien raised its shield to block, but Bonner twisted in midair, landing behind the commander and firing into the exposed joints of its armor. The energy bolts burned through, eliciting a pained roar from the alien as it spun to face him. Before it could strike, Cole rejoined the fight, leaping onto the alien's back and locking his arms around its neck. The commander thrashed violently, trying to throw him off, but Cole clung on with unrelenting determination. "Now, Bonner," Cole shouted. Bonner didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired 3 precise shots into the alien's exposed chest. The commander staggered, its strength faltering as Cole tightened his grip. With a final, desperate roar, the alien collapsed to the ground, its plasma halberd clattering from its grasp. Cole rolled aside as the body hit the floor, smoke rising from the smoking wounds. "Control console, go," Bonner ordered. Reyes sprinted to the console, fingers flying across the holographic interface as he bypassed the security protocols. Warning messages flashed in alien script, but Reyes ignored them, focusing on his training as he accessed the defense systems. Come on," he muttered. Outside, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the air as the human fleet intensified its bombardment. The outpost's automated turrets fired skyward, attempting to intercept the incoming strike craft. Bonner could see the battle unfolding through the room's panoramic viewport, streaks of plasma and tracer fire weaving through the night sky as human fighters clashed with Zoreth interceptors. "Hurry up, Reyes," Bonner urged. "Almost there. Just need a few more seconds," Reyes replied, sweat dripping down his brow. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor behind them, more Zereth soldiers closing in fast. Bonner and Cole took up defensive positions near the doorway, pulse rifles ready as the first soldiers appeared. Blue plasma fire lit up the corridor as both sides exchanged fire, the air thick with heat and the acrid scent of scorched metal. "Reyes, now," Bonner shouted. "Done," Reyes cried, slamming his hand against the console. A pulse of blue light shot through the walls as the outpost's defense grid shut down. Outside, the automated turrets fell silent, their targeting systems fried beyond repair. The human fleet seized the opportunity, waves of strike craft descending upon the now vulnerable outpost with relentless precision. Bonner didn't wait to see the results. "Fall back. Move, move, move." The squad sprinted from the control room, plasma fire sizzling past them as Zereth soldiers poured into the corridor. Bonner fired over his shoulder, dropping 2 pursuers as Cole and Reyes led the way through the maze of steel corridors. Red emergency lights flashed overhead, casting harsh shadows that flickered with each explosion that rocked the walls. They reached the outer perimeter just as the human fleet's bombardment intensified. Orbital strikes hammered the distant spires, sending shockwaves that rattled the ground beneath their feet. Fires erupted from ruptured fuel lines, painting the night sky with columns of smoke and flame. "Extraction points 2 clicks south," Bonner shouted, ducking beneath a burst of plasma fire from a pursuing drone. Cole spun, firing his pulse pistol and blasting the drone from the air with a precise shot. The wreckage crashed to the ground, sparks erupting as its systems failed. "Keep moving," Cole shouted. They sprinted through the burning wreckage of the outpost's outer defenses, boots pounding against scorched metal as debris rained down from above. Explosions rocked the ground, sending shockwaves that nearly knocked them off their feet. Yet they pressed on, driven by sheer determination as the human fleet rained fire from the skies. At last, they'd reached the extraction point, a rocky clearing where a sleek human dropship hovered just above the ground, side ramp open and waiting. Bonner waved his squad forward, firing his rifle at the pursuing Zereth soldiers as they scrambled aboard. "Go, go, go," Bonner shouted, leaping onto the ramp as plasma fire scorched the air behind him. The ramp sealed shut, and the dropship's engines roared as it lifted off, racing away from the burning outpost below. Bonner collapsed into a seat, pulse racing as the adrenaline slowly began to fade. Cole sat beside him, breathing heavily but otherwise unharmed. Across from them, Rise wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "Not bad for a rookie," Cole said with a faint grin. Rise managed a shaky smile. "Thanks, I think." Bonner leaned back, feeling the tension begin to drain from his muscles. Outside the viewport, the burning wreckage of Outpost Theta 9 faded into the distance as the dropship ascended toward the stars. "One battle down," Bonner muttered to himself. But the war's just begun. The dropship jolted violently as it banked hard to the left, engines roaring against the thin atmosphere of the war-torn moon. Bonner clutched the overhead strap to steady himself, feeling the sudden shift in gravity pull at his gut. Outside the viewport, streaks of plasma fire zipped past the ship's hull, leaving trails of blue light that faded into the darkness. Zereth interceptors swarmed after them like metallic predators, their sleek frames glinting in the firelight of the burning outpost below. "Pilot, what's going on?" Bonner shouted over the roar of the engines. "Zereth fighters closing fast." "I can't shake them," the pilot called back, fingers flying across the controls as the dropship rolled sharply to avoid another barrage of plasma bolts. The air inside the cabin buzzed with static energy as the shields absorbed glancing hits, but Bonner knew they wouldn't hold for long. Cole strapped himself into the seat beside Bonner, pulse pistol clutched tightly in his hand despite the chaos. Across from them, Raids gripped the edge of his seat, knuckles white as he braced against the ship's erratic movements. His wide eyes flicked to Bonner. "We're not gonna make it, are we?" "Hold it together, Reyes," Bonner barked. "We've survived worse than this. Just stay sharp." The ship lurched again as a direct hit rocked the hull, sparks bursting from the overhead conduits. Warning lights flashed red across the control panels as the pilot struggled to stabilize the craft. Smoke filled the air, thick and acrid as systems began to fail one by one. "Mayday, mayday," the pilot shouted into the comms. "We've taken heavy damage. Going down hard. Brace for impact." Bonner barely had time to grab hold of the nearest support beam before the world spun violently around him. The dropship twisted through the air, engine sputtering as it plummeted toward the jagged cliffs below. The deafening roar of wind and tearing metal drowned out all other sounds until, with a bone-shaking crash, the ship smashed into the rocky surface. Everything went black. Bonner awoke to the distant crackle of fire and the faint hum of damaged electronics. Pain throbbed through his skull, and his ears rang with a high-pitched whine that made it hard to focus. Smoke filled the air, stinging his lungs as he forced himself to sit up. The cabin was a wreck. Twisted metal and shattered equipment littered the floor, and the walls bore deep scorch marks from the crash. "Cole. Reyes?" Bonner's voice was hoarse as he scanned the wreckage. "Here. I'm here." Cole groaned from across the cabin, pulling himself out from beneath a collapsed support beam. Blood trickled down the side of his face, but he was still moving. Reyes coughed violently, trying to clear the smoke from his lungs as he pushed aside a broken console. I'm okay, I think. Bonner exhaled in relief. Good. We don't have time to rest. The Zareth won't leave survivors. Through the shattered viewport, Bonner could see the jagged cliffs that surrounded the crash site. The dropship had come down in a narrow canyon, its steep walls rising high on either side. Fires from the wreckage flickered against the rock, casting long shadows that danced in the darkness. "Pilot," Bonner called out, stepping toward the cockpit. There was no answer. The pilot's seat was crushed beneath twisted metal, sparks still flickering from the destroyed control panel. Bonner clenched his jaw and forced himself to look away. There was no time to mourn. "We need to move," he said, turning back to the others. "Weapons and supplies. Grab what you can." Cole pulled a spare pulse rifle from the emergency locker, slinging it over his shoulder as he checked the remaining ammunition. Reyes gathered a small medkit and a handheld comm unit, though its cracked screen flickered with static. Bonner strapped his pulse rifle to his back, eyes scanning the wreckage for anything else they could use. Then he heard it, the distant hum of approaching engines. "Zareth patrol inbound," Bonner hissed, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Move, now." They scrambled out of the wreckage, boots crunching against broken glass and scorched metal as they sprinted into the canyon's shadows. The air was thick with smoke and the lingering heat of the crash, but they pressed on, weaving between jagged rocks and uneven terrain. The hum of engines grew louder, echoing through the canyon like the growl of some distant predator. Bonner risked a glance back and saw 3 Zareth drones descending toward the wreckage, sleek, insect-like machines with glowing blue optics that swept the area in search of survivors. Their metallic limbs unfolded as they touched down, plasma rifles extending from their chassis as they began scanning the wreckage. Bonner motioned for the others to crouch low as they crept along the canyon wall, staying within the shadows to avoid detection. His pulse pounded in his ears as they moved silently, each step measured and careful. The distant hum of engines faded slightly as the drones focused on the wreckage, but Bonner knew it was only a matter of time before they expanded their search. They rounded a bend in the canyon, but Bonner's heart sank as he saw what lay ahead. A sheer rock wall rising nearly 30 feet high, slick with moisture from the thin mist that clung to the canyon floor. There was no way to climb it without drawing attention, and doubling back would lead them straight into the drone's search pattern. "Trapped," Cole muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Outnumbered and outgunned," Reyes added, his voice shaky. "We're not gonna make it." "We've come too far to give up now," Bonner snapped, eyes blazing with determination. "We've faced worse odds before, and we're still breathing." The distant clatter of metal footsteps echoed through the canyon as the drones approached. Their blue optics cast faint beams of light across the rocky walls, sweeping the shadows as they hunted their prey. Bonner signaled for the others to take cover behind a cluster of boulders, raising his rifle as he steadied his breathing. The first drone rounded the corner, its optics flickering as it detected movement. Bonner fired without hesitation, 3 precise shots that struck its core, causing the machine to convulse and collapse in a shower of sparks. The second drone charged forward, plasma rifle blazing as bolts of blue energy scorched the rocks around them. Cole returned fire, pulse rifle barking as he advanced on the machine. Its armor deflected the first few shots, but Cole pressed forward, ducking beneath a burst of plasma fire before delivering a close-range shot to its optic sensor. The drone staggered back, and Bonner finished it with a burst to the core. The third drone was faster, leaping onto the canyon wall and clinging to the rock like a spider. Its plasma rifle swiveled, targeting Reyes as the rookie scrambled to reload his weapon. "Reyes, move," Bonner shouted, but the drone fired before Reyes could react. The bolt grazed Reyes' shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground with a cry of pain. Bonner fired at the drone, but it was too fast, scrambling across the rock face with unnerving agility. Cole boosted himself upward with his kinetic enhancers, reaching the drone's perch and delivering a brutal kick that knocked it from the wall. The machine crashed to the ground, and Bonner finished it with a burst of pulse fire. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by Raya's ragged breathing as he clutched his shoulder. "You're okay, kid. It's just a graze," Bonner said, kneeling beside him as he opened the medkit. Raya's winced as Bonner applied a quick coagulant spray to the wound, stopping the bleeding within seconds. Cole scanned the canyon walls, pulse rifle still raised. "More will be coming. We need to find a way out before they send reinforcements." Bonner looked up at the sheer wall ahead. The rock was slick, but there were enough handholds to make a climb possible, if they moved fast. "Cole, you're first," Bonner ordered. "Use your boosters to get up there and secure the top. Rise, you follow me." Cole activated his kinetic enhancers, leaping upward in quick bursts until he reached the top. He scanned the area, rifle at the ready as he signaled that the coast was clear. Bonner slung his rifle across his back, gripping the rough stone as he began to climb. The rock was cold beneath his hands, slick with moisture that made each hold treacherous. His muscles burned with exertion, but he pushed forward, refusing to let exhaustion slow him down. Reyes followed closely, his injured shoulder slowing him, but not stopping him. Bonner kept pace beside him, ready to catch the rookie if he slipped. They reached the top just as the distant hum of more drones echoed through the canyon below. Bonner helped Reyes over the edge, then collapsed beside Cole, chest heaving as he caught his breath. Far below, blue lights flickered through the darkness as more Zereth forces swarmed the crash site, their search intensifying with every passing second. But the three soldiers were gone, ghosts in the night, moving ever closer to their ultimate mission. "Still outnumbered," Bonner muttered, eyes hard with determination. "But we're not done yet." The air was thick with smoke and static as Bonner crouched behind the remains of a collapsed wall, pulse rifle clutched tightly in his hands. The distant rumble of Zereth war machines echoed through the shattered city, their metallic footsteps shaking the ground like distant thunder. Fires burned unchecked in the ruins around him, casting flickering shadows across twisted metal and broken stone. The night sky above was a tapestry of stars marred by the faint glow of distant orbital bombardments, each flash a reminder of the war raging beyond the atmosphere. Bonner's comm unit crackled to life. "Bonner, this is command. Status report. Team is in position." Bonner replied, eyes scanning the rubble-strewn streets for any sign of movement. "No sign of patrols yet, but they're close. We're ready to move on your signal." "Understood. The fleet is preparing for the main assault. You need to take down the planetary defense grid before they arrive, or this mission's a bust." "Copy that," Bonner said. He glanced over his shoulder, meeting Cole's determined gaze. Rise knelt beside them, cradling his injured shoulder but ready to fight. The young soldier's eyes still held a flicker of fear, but Bonner could see the steel beneath the surface. They had come too far to fail now. Bonner signaled silently, and the three soldiers moved as one, slipping through the rubble-strewn streets with the practiced precision of warriors who had learned to survive against impossible odds. Their boots crunched softly against shattered glass and broken stone, but they moved quickly, every step measured and deliberate. The air smelled of scorched metal and burned ozone, a grim reminder of the battles that had already been fought, and the one that was yet to come. The planetary defense complex loomed ahead, its spires of black steel rising like jagged claws against the night sky. Glowing blue conduits snaked along the exterior walls, pulsing with the energy that powered the massive orbital cannons hidden within. Without those cannons, the human fleet would be able to descend unchallenged, but as long as they remained operational, any approach would be suicide. A faint hum drifted through the air, the sound of approaching patrol drones. Bonner pressed himself against the rough stone of a collapsed building, signaling for Cole and Rice to do the same. Blue lights flickered in the distance, weaving through the wreckage like predatory eyes searching for prey. The drones moved with eerie grace, their sleek frames reflecting the firelight as they swept the area with cold, mechanical precision. Bonner waited, breath slow and steady as the drones passed within meters of their position. The hum of their power cores vibrated in his bones, a constant reminder of how fragile their cover truly was. One wrong move, one stray sound, and the machines would descend upon them with lethal efficiency. But the soldiers remained silent, invisible ghosts within the shattered city. As the drones disappeared into the distance, Bonner motioned for the team to move. They crept forward, weaving through the maze of rubble, until they reached the base of the complex's outer wall. Bonner pressed a gloved hand against the cold steel, feeling the faint vibration of power thrumming through the structure. "Cole, you're up," he whispered. Cole knelt beside the wall, pulling a compact device from his pack. The EMP charge was small but powerful, designed to disable the security systems long enough for them to breach the outer perimeter. Cole pressed the device against the wall and activated the timer, its faint blue display counting down from 10 seconds. "Get ready," Bonner muttered, pulse rifle raised as adrenaline surged through his veins. The charge detonated with a muffled pulse of energy that sent a ripple through the air, momentarily disrupting the electrical hum of the complex. Bonner didn't hesitate. He grabbed the edge of the maintenance hatch and wrenched it open, motioning for Cole and Rice to follow as he slipped inside. The interior of the complex was a maze of steel corridors and glowing conduits, the air thick with the faint hum of machinery. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting faint shadows that danced across the metallic walls. Bonner moved swiftly, pulse rifle raised as he led the way deeper into the heart of the facility. The distant thrum of the planetary cannons reverberated through the structure, a constant reminder of the firepower that would soon be turned against the human fleet, unless they succeeded. The corridor had split into two branches. Bonner paused, studying the faint markings etched into the walls. He tapped his comm unit. "Command, we're inside. Need a path to the main control room." "Stand by, Bonner," the operator replied. A moment later, a faint holographic overlay appeared on Bonner's HUD, mapping out the route ahead. "Proceed through the east corridor. Expect heavy resistance near the core." "Understood." Bonner cut the comm and signaled for the team to move. They advanced through the maze-like corridors, boots clanging softly against the steel floor. The air grew warmer as they approached the facility's core, the temperature rising from the immense energy coursing through the nearby power conduits. The hum of machinery grew louder, mingling with the distant clatter of approaching footsteps, metallic, precise, and unmistakably Zereth. Bonner raised his fist, signaling the team to halt as shadows flickered at the corridor's edge. Seconds later, a squad of Zereth sentinels emerged, tall, humanoid machines with sleek black armor and glowing blue optics. Their plasma rifles hummed to life as they spotted the intruders, and chaos erupted in an instant. Bonner fired first, his pulse rifle barking as bursts of energy struck the nearest sentinel, staggering it back. Cole moved with lethal speed, kinetic enhancers propelling him into the fray as he delivered a crushing blow that sent one machine crashing into the wall. Rice ducked beneath a burst of plasma fire, his pulse pistol spitting rapid shots that shattered a sentinel's optic sensors. The corridor became a battleground of steel and fire, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning circuits and seared metal. Bonner moved with deadly precision, each shot placed with calculated efficiency as he advanced through the chaos. A sentinel lunged toward him, plasma blade extending from its wrist, but Bonner sidestepped the attack and drove the barrel of his rifle into the machine's chest, firing point-blank. The sentinel collapsed in a burst of sparks, its metallic limbs twitching as its systems failed. "Keep moving," Bonner shouted over the din, adrenaline surging through his veins as they pressed forward. The corridor opened into a wide chamber filled with towering conduits and control terminals, the air shimmering with heat from the massive reactor that powered the planetary cannons. There, Bonner pointed toward the central control console, its holographic interface flickering with alien script. "Rise, get that system offline. Now." Rise sprinted to the console, fingers flying across the controls as he bypassed the Zereth security protocols. The alien symbols flashed red as the system resisted his intrusion, but Reyes gritted his teeth and pressed harder, sweat beading on his brow, as he worked against the clock. More sentinels poured into the chamber, plasma rifles blazing as they opened fire. Cole vaulted over a nearby console, landing amidst the enemy with kinetic-enhanced speed. His pulse rifle barked as he fired point-blank, shattering one machine's core before pivoting to deliver a brutal kick that sent another crashing into a power conduit. The air crackled with energy as the conduit ruptured, sparks cascading across the floor in a shower of blue light. Bonner fired with relentless precision, each shot dropping another enemy as he fought to hold the line. His muscles burned with exertion, but he refused to yield. Not now. Not when victory was within reach. "Almost there," Rice shouted, fingers still flying across the controls as the system's defenses began to crumble. Warning lights flashed across the chamber as the reactor's output fluctuated, power conduits pulsing erratically as the system teetered on the brink of overload. A sentinel lunged toward Reyes, plasma blades slicing through the air, but Bonner was faster. He fired a burst of pulse fire that sent the machine staggering back, then charged forward and drove his rifle into its chest, firing point-blank until it collapsed in a heap of twisted metal. "Done," Rice shouted, slamming his fist against the console as the holographic interface flickered and died. The air was suddenly filled with the deafening wail of emergency sirens as the reactor's containment field began to fail, warning lights flashing red across every surface. "Time to go," Bonner shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins as they sprinted back toward the corridor. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the reactor's core destabilized, pulses of blue light flashing through the conduits with increasing intensity. They raced through the maze-like corridors, the air thick with heat and the distant rumble of collapsing machinery. The outer hatch loomed ahead, faint moonlight spilling through the opening as they sprinted toward freedom. They burst from the complex just as the reactor detonated, a blinding pulse of blue energy erupting into the night sky. The shockwave hit them like a hammer, hurling them to the ground as a plume of fire and debris shot into the air. The sound was deafening, a thunderous roar that echoed through the shattered city like the wrath of a vengeful god. Bonner rolled onto his back, chest heaving as he stared up at the stars. Above, the distant glow of the human fleet descended through the atmosphere, unchallenged and unstoppable. Victory was theirs. The sky burned with streaks of fire as the human fleet descended, their engines roaring through the atmosphere like the battle cry of an entire species. Massive dreadnoughts led the charge, their hulls gleaming against the smoke-filled night as swarms of smaller fighters spiraled around them. Each ship bore the scars of countless battles, yet their advance was relentless, unstoppable. Humanity had come to finish the war, and this time, there would be no retreat. Bonner stood atop the rubble of a collapsed tower, pulse rifle slung across his back as he gazed at the approaching fleet. His uniform was torn, his armor scorched, but his eyes burned with the fire of a soldier who refused to yield. Around him, the survivors of his team gathered, their breaths heavy from the final sprint away from the collapsing defense complex. Cole adjusted the grip on his rifle, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where the Zareth's last stronghold stood. Rise clutched his injured shoulder but stood tall, determination etched into every line of his face. "We did it," Rise breathed, almost in disbelief. "Not yet," Bonner replied, voice firm but steady. "The fleet's here, but the Zareth won't go down without a fight. We've still got one last job to do." The ground trembled beneath their feet as distant explosions echoed across the battlefield. The Zareth forces, though wounded, were not broken. Their war machines still prowled the streets, towering walkers of black steel and gleaming plasma cannons, firing at the advancing human forces. Drone swarms circled overhead, their sleek frames weaving through the smoke-choked air as they hunted for any sign of human soldiers. The city itself seemed to groan under the weight of the ongoing battle, skyscrapers crumbling into dust as artillery shells shattered their foundations. Bonner tapped his comm unit. "Command, this is Bonner. Defense grid is down. Fleet's clear to engage, but ground forces still need support. What's our next move?" "Good work, Bonner. The main fleet is targeting the Zareth's orbital platforms, but we need you to push forward and secure the central command hub. If we can take control of their network, we can shut down their remaining forces planet-wide." "Understood. We're moving out now." Bonner turned to his team, eyes blazing with determination. "This is it, the last push. We take that hub, and this war ends today. No more running, no more hiding. Humanity stands unbroken, and we finish this fight on our terms." Cole nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. Rice straightened his shoulders despite the pain, his eyes burning with the same unyielding resolve. They moved through the shattered city with swift precision, weaving through the rubble-strewn streets as artillery shells thundered overhead. Fires burned unchecked, casting flickering shadows across the broken remains of buildings and vehicles alike. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of scorched metal, but Bonner pressed forward without hesitation. This was humanity's moment. There would be no turning back. Ahead, the Zareth command hub loomed against the night sky, a fortress of black steel and pulsing blue conduits that seemed to pulse with alien energy. Towering defense turrets swiveled toward the approaching human forces, plasma cannons firing bursts of searing energy that scorched the ground with each impact. Drones swarmed around the structure like mechanical wasps, their sleek frames darting through the air as they hunted for intruders. "Done," Rice shouted, slamming his fist against the console as the holographic interface flickered and died. The air was suddenly filled with the deafening wail of emergency sirens as the reactor's containment field began to fail, warning lights flashing red across every surface. "Time to go," Bonner shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins as they sprinted back toward the corridor. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the reactor's core destabilized, pulses of blue light flashing through the conduits with increasing intensity. They raced through the maze-like corridors, the air thick with heat and the distant rumble of collapsing machinery. The outer hatch loomed ahead, faint moonlight spilling through the opening as they sprinted toward freedom. They burst from the complex just as the reactor detonated, a blinding pulse of blue energy erupting into the night sky. The shockwave hit them like a hammer, hurling them to the ground as a plume of fire and debris shot into the air. The sound was deafening, a thunderous roar that echoed through the shattered city like the wrath of a vengeful god. Bonner rolled onto his back, chest heaving as he stared up at the stars. Above, the distant glow of the human fleet descended through the atmosphere, unchallenged and unstoppable. Victory was theirs. The sky burned with streaks of fire as the human fleet descended, their engines roaring through the atmosphere like the battle cry of an entire species. Massive dreadnoughts led the charge, their hulls gleaming against the smoke-filled night as swarms of smaller fighters spiraled around them. Each ship bore the scars of countless battles, yet their advance was relentless, unstoppable. Humanity had come to finish the war, and this time there would be no retreat. Bonner stood atop the rubble of a collapsed tower, pulse rifle slung across his back as he gazed at the approaching fleet. His uniform was torn, his armor scorched, but his eyes burned with the fire of a soldier who refused to yield. Around him, the survivors of his team gathered, their breaths heavy from the final sprint away from the collapsing defense complex. Cole adjusted the grip on his rifle, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where the Zareth's last stronghold stood. Rice clutched his injured shoulder but stood tall, determination etched into every line of his face. "We did it," Rice breathed, almost in disbelief. "Not yet," Bonner replied, voice firm but steady. "The fleet's here, but the Zereth won't go down without a fight. We've still got one last job to do." The ground trembled beneath their feet as distant explosions echoed across the battlefield. The Zereth forces, though wounded, were not broken. Their war machines still prowled the streets, towering walkers of black steel and gleaming plasma cannons, firing at the advancing human forces. Drone swarms circled overhead, their sleek frames weaving through the smoke-choked air as they hunted for any sign of human soldiers. The city itself seemed to groan under the weight of the ongoing battle, skyscrapers crumbling into dust as artillery shells shattered their foundations. Bonner tapped his comm unit. "Command, this is Bonner. Defense grid is down. Fleet's clear to engage, but ground forces still need support. What's our next move?" "Good work, Bonner. The main fleet is targeting the Zereth's orbital platforms, but we need you to push forward and secure the central command hub. If we can take control of their network, we can shut down their remaining forces planet-wide." "Understood. We're moving out now." Bonner turned to his team, eyes blazing with determination. "This is it, the last push. We take that hub, and this war ends today. No more running, no more hiding. Humanity stands unbroken, and we finish this fight on our terms." Cole nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. Rice straightened his shoulders despite the pain, his eyes burning with the same unyielding resolve. They moved through the shattered city with swift precision, weaving through the rubble-strewn streets as artillery shells thundered overhead. Fires burned unchecked, casting flickering shadows across the broken remains of buildings and vehicles alike. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of scorched metal, but Bonner pressed forward without hesitation. This was humanity's moment. There would be no turning back. Ahead, the Zereth command hub loomed against the night sky, a fortress of black steel and pulsing blue conduits that seemed to pulse with alien energy. Towering defense turrets swiveled toward the approaching human forces, plasma cannons firing bursts of searing energy that scorched the ground with each impact. Drones swarmed around the structure like mechanical wasps, their sleek frames darting through the air as they hunted for intruders. Bonner raised his pulse rifle, adrenaline surging through his veins as he led the charge. "Move." They sprinted across the open ground, pulse rifles blazing as they engaged the drones. Blue energy bursts lit up the night, streaking through the air as Bonner fired shot after shot with deadly precision. Cole moved with kinetic-enhanced speed, weaving through enemy fire as he fired on the move. Rise provided covering fire, his injured arm slowing him but not stopping him as he cut down the drones with rapid bursts of pulse fire. The ground shuddered beneath their feet as a towering Zereth walker emerged from behind the command hub, its four massive legs crushing rubble beneath their weight. Plasma cannons mounted on its shoulders charged with a rising hum, blue energy gathering at their tips as the machine locked onto the approaching humans. "Spread out," Bonner shouted as the walker opened fire. Blinding streaks of plasma scorched the ground, sending shards of molten rock flying through the air as the soldiers dove for cover. Bonner rolled behind a collapsed vehicle, pulse rifle snapping up as he fired at the walker's optical sensors. Sparks erupted as the shots struck home, momentarily blinding the machine and halting its advance. Cole seized the opportunity, vaulting over a pile of rubble and sprinting toward the walker's exposed flank. He activated his kinetic boosters, leaping onto the machine's leg with enhanced strength and speed. Clinging to the metal surface, he planted an explosive charge against the joint and leaped clear just as the device detonated in a burst of fire and shrapnel. The walker staggered, its damaged limb collapsing beneath its weight as it crashed to the ground with a thunderous roar. Bonner and Rice pressed the attack, pulse rifles blazing as they targeted the walker's exposed core. Sparks and molten metal flew as their shots found their mark, and with a final burst of energy, the machine's systems overloaded in a blinding explosion that rocked the battlefield. Smoke and debris rained down around them as Bonner pulled himself to his feet, coughing against the thick haze. The command hub loomed ahead, its defenses battered but still operational. Plasma turrets swiveled toward the advancing humans, their cannons charging for another barrage. "Reyes, we need a way inside." "Now," Bonner shouted over the roar of battle. On it, Reyes sprinted to a nearby terminal, fingers flying across the alien controls as he bypassed the Zereth's security protocols. Blue symbols flashed across the screen as the system resisted his intrusion, but Reyes gritted his teeth and pressed harder. Come on," he muttered. The air crackled with heat as plasma blasts scorched the ground around them, forcing Bonner and Cole to return fire as they fought to keep the turrets occupied. Their pulse rifles blazed with rapid bursts of energy, but the turret's armor was thick, and their ammunition was running low. "Reyes," Bonner shouted, urgency tightening his voice. "Almost there," Reyes barked in reply. A sudden pulse of blue light erupted from the terminal, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated as the command hub's outer defenses powered down. The plasma turrets fell silent, their cannons drooping as their power conduits deactivated. Above them, the swarm of drones faltered mid-flight, their optics flickering before they crashed to the ground in lifeless heaps of metal. "Go," Bonner shouted, leading the charge into the heart of the Zereth command hub. They stormed through the massive entrance, pulse rifles raised as they advanced through the fortress's steel corridors. The air was thick with the hum of machinery, but the resistance was light. The Zereth's automated defenses had been disabled, and their remaining forces were scattered across the battlefield outside. The command center lay ahead, a chamber of sleek black metal and glowing blue consoles arranged around a central holographic display. The air crackled with the faint hum of energy as Bonner stepped forward, pulse rifle raised as he scanned the room for any remaining threats. "Clear," Cole confirmed, sweeping his rifle across the chamber. Reyes approached the central console, his fingers dancing across the alien controls as he accessed the Zereth's planetary network. Blue symbols flickered and shifted as he navigated the system, bypassing firewalls and security protocols with practiced efficiency. "Command, this is Bonner," he said, tapping his comm unit. "We're in the control center. Reyes is shutting down their remaining forces now." "Copy that, Bonner. The fleet has destroyed the Zereth's orbital platforms. This planet is ours. Finish the job and get out of there." "Understood." "Reyes?" "Almost done," Reyes replied, fingers flying across the controls. "Just a few more seconds." The air seemed to hold its breath as the system resisted, blue symbols flashing red as the Zereth's last line of defense activated. But Reyes pressed harder, sweat beading on his brow as he forced his way through the final barriers. A pulse of energy surged through the room as the network collapsed, and outside, the remaining Zereth war machines froze mid-stride. Their optics flickered, limbs twitching as their systems failed one by one. Across the battlefield, human soldiers watched in awe as their enemies crumbled to the ground, lifeless and powerless. Reyes stepped back from the console, exhaling a shaky breath as the last of the Zereth's defenses shut down. Bonner clapped a hand on his shoulder, a rare smile breaking through the hardened lines of his face. "It's over," he said, the words heavy with both relief and finality. Cole stepped beside them, gazing out through the shattered window at the battlefield beyond. Fires still burned, and the city lay in ruins, but the skies were clear. The war was won. Bonner turned his gaze to the distant horizon, where the first light of dawn began to break through the smoke-choked sky. It was not just the dawn of a new day. It was the dawn of a new era. Humanity had stood against the darkness and emerged victorious. And now, the future was theirs to shape.